Many established companies struggle. How do you modernize for growth, especially with AI, right? That's coming, while keeping the culture that made you successful? How can you breathe new life into a business without losing its soul? This week's guest helps businesses achieve explosive results while preserving their core values. If you're ready for strategy talks, join us. Stay tuned.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Here's your host, Morin-van.
Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of Strategy Talks. If you've been watching, you know we have a wide variety of guests on the show. Today, we have somebody from the state of Texas. And interestingly enough, he only does business in Texas. So why do you want to know him? We're going to get to that in just a second. I want to welcome everybody to Strategy Talks. Those who are here live, let us know in the comments where you're joining us from, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or on Facebook. If you're watching this episode as a replay, put hashtag replay in the comments so my guest and myself can see those questions pop up. And of course, last but not least, if you are listening to Strategy Talks as a podcast, I want to welcome you as well. So without much further ado, I'm going to bring onto the stage with me, Malcolm Peace. How are you today, Malcolm?
I'm doing great, Doreen. Thanks for having me. Really, really an honor.
Absolutely. It's fun. And we were just chatting in the green room, getting to know each other. So my first question to you is, what do you do? Why Texas? And how do you help people? So let's start with that.
Yeah, great question. So, everybody's got a story. My story is, how do I carve out my little thing that works for what I'm looking for and kind of make some money out of it, but also do some cool work at the same time? And candidly, I started working with blue collar industrial guys in a vendor capacity. I was running some projects. We were doing some real estate projects and business projects. And I started running into these guys over and over and over again that own these businesses, had built this great reputation in the community. I mean, candidly, if it was, something I needed, I was calling the 1, 2, or 3 on the Google reviews, and they had this great reputation. But what I found is that as they interacted with me, I was young 30s at the time, they didn't have a plan. As I started getting to know them and building this reputation over time, as we're going back and forth on plans and all these different things, they didn't have a plan of what their business was going to look like into the future. And so we started building at the time some pretty neat tools that could help these businesses really scale up outside of being that one person shop or multiple, disposition situations where they could all kind of come together and all that kind of saying together, we were able to, see that there was an opportunity for this. And so I've slowly built the team over time. I use a lot of we's and they's in the conversation. I obviously was the initial gas to get things going, but I'm grateful for the team that we built now. And we exclusively buy businesses in Texas. One, it's one of the largest economies in the world. And two, we understand it and the laws and the implications. We don't try to remove ourselves from the day-to-day operations too far. So we've got to know the implications. What does it look like to employ people in a state? What are the tax implications? All those types of things. We try to be very much roll up our sleeves and get involved in the businesses we acquire.
Okay. So somebody who's listening, we now have an understanding. You go in, you work with blue collar businesses, you purchase them,
Yep.
and then you go run them.
That's right.
So you come in after the previous owner is retired. Most of them are legacy, right? They're ready to cash out. And you come in and then you get the issue. And if you're watching this and you work in a corporation that's been sold, or you work even for a smaller business that has changed ownership, there is fear, there is worry, there are all kinds of concerns that come with new ownership, right?
Yeah.
So let's walk through some of the things that you do to take care of the business so that it stays healthy and it grows, because you were talking about doubling, in 2 years, right? But also, how do you take care of the people? Because really today we're going to talk about building that company culture. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was all great. You teed that up well. It's candidly, like you said, when you transition from a former owner, depending on the culture that's previously built there's things that you obviously want to retain as much as you possibly can. And then there's some things that the business needs to transition out of for it to go to its next phase. And sometimes that next phase is adopted really easily, and sometimes that next phase is not so much. But what I tell everybody when we make that first transition, I know this is nuanced, but we try to make sure that people in-house are taken care of first, then we take care of the external. That way we can stabilize the transition. And there's a lot of questions that happen there. So we have that first intro kind of conversation. Here I am, who I am. Sometimes that happens pre the transaction being fully closed. But most of the time it happens just right afterwards. And in some cases, people are very shocked. Some people, they are expecting it. Sometimes it's warm welcomes. Sometimes it's very confused welcomes, all the things you spoke to. And so all that to be said, our goal is to answer as many questions as possible, but also start creating a culture of this is a marathon, right? Because what ends up happening a lot of the time during this transition is people have all these great ideas or all these concerns or all these things they want to solve like with an immediate change to see it happen. And they want to stack their priority at the top of the list. And if I can continue to convey over and over again, this is a marathon. We have no intention of selling these businesses. So-and-so held onto it for the last 3 decades, 4 decades. We intend on doing the same thing. Your situation stabilized. We're not trying to transition all this kind of stuff. That allows them to feel secure so that they can go back and do their best work. And then we can start thinking about what's next in the process. So we do a lot when we transition behind the scenes rather than trying to change their ecosystem on a day-to-day basis on the immediate.
All right. So I want to dive into that just for a second.
Sure.
So when you have, say, a business has 10 employees or 30 or 50, I just want to know, like, do you go and talk to them as a group? Do you have individual conversations? Again, I want to get to the bottom of this because build a company culture. I want to see what kind of leadership is required to do that, because I think that's what I'm hearing you say. You are a proven leader. You figured out how to do that. And I want to extract that strategy from you, because I think that's really, really valuable for people to understand. It is so easy to say, clean slate, I'm going to do it my way. But what I'm hearing you say is that you are having conversations. So how are you having those conversations? And do you make any kind of guarantees to people, or you just are asking them to trust you when you have those conversations?
Yeah, great question. So we, obviously I said before, we try to convey that this is a marathon, but there are some guarantees that I need to make to them. Their paycheck's going to clear. That's the first one. Their job's not going anywhere. We have no plans on that, but we do establish some rigidness to what is actually occurring right now. So for the first time, usually in company culture, and I know this is nuance, they often don't have an org chart. They have no understanding of, maybe they have some understanding of who reports to who, but they have no understanding of where they're going in this company. And my take, and I know that this may be a hot take for some, I want to be around ambitious people that want to help us go to that next level. And there's a lot of people that don't want that as well. And so as we go through the process of, hey, we're going to grow, like you said earlier, our goal is to double revenue in 2 years. If we establish that goal, it requires us to make decisions along the way strategically, less on the HR side often, more strategically about what we're trying to do, how much we're trying to market to, what kind of data we need to be managing, all those types of things, that culture starts kind of spreading throughout the people that want to adopt it. And the ones that don't, they usually self-select out. And I don't think I've ever had to, besides one guy that got a little bit weird about a new policy I introduced for holidays. I bought this company, never had paid holidays in the future of the company, or in the previous past ownership of the company, thought I was doing the right thing, didn't have a holiday on the calendar that was paid. He didn't show up. It was a whole little thing. So that became like, he wanted more than I was willing to give at the time, because the business needed to stabilize through the same transition. That was the only time in history I've ever had someone say, or I've had to have that conversation of, hey, you just don't need to come back. It's okay. Like, you and I are having this argument. It's clear you're not interested in being a part of what we're building. So just, it's okay. And he chose to leave on his own and, through his own choices. And so all that to be said, people select to be a part of the culture you create. And if the previous owner's culture was, we'll just kind of do everything through me. I'll answer all the questions. I am the head honcho. That's one culture that we can't build if we're going to grow this business. It has to be decentralized responsibility. It has to be autonomy. It has to be clear understandings of measurable results, all these types of things. That there are some people that just don't want that. And I completely respect that. And I'm trying to build a business here to be for decades and decades to come. And so as a result, that culture has to be established in a kind of a different direction sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So I want to step back for a second. So if somebody's watching, they have built their business, whether they're in Texas or somewhere else, and they're thinking about their legacy, right? They're thinking about maybe selling in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Let's talk about that person. You work with them, right? You buy from them.
Yep.
What can somebody do right now? They're listening, they're watching this, and they're like, that's going to be me.
Yeah.
What can somebody do to prepare their business, their team, to have that sale and to make that transition easier for everybody involved? Not just for them, not just get the best price, but caring for their team.
Yeah.
What are some things that you've seen that people have done right and people have done wrong?
Tough question without a hot take. I'll be honest with you.
Go ahead.
I would tell that business owner to go on vacation for a week and turn their phone off.
Oh,
just turn it off and see what happens.
I see.
I was
so that would be that would be once the sale is final.
No, before.
No, before.
I do it before. If I was thinking in 3 to 5 years, I want to sell this business, you have so much time to do it, but there's also a compression of change that has to most likely take place, that I would do it now. And I would go and say, hey, all these things come through me. I answer all these questions, whether it be approving $1,000 payment to a vendor or approving, someone's sick leave or whatever it may be. I mean, there's so many little things that often come through that I would turn your phone off for a week and tell everybody you're going to do it. Don't tell them to hold things. Let them naturally build up your inbox, not like they would, and come back and record back all of those things that came to you. And then what we use culturally, and we do a lot of offshoring. So just FYI, we've got a 100-day plan. It's on our website. People can check it out. Things that we go implement. Well, we hire virtual assistants to come in and do specific things. And we consider those $10 tasks. It's just by rate of exchange of currency. We consider them $10 tasks. Anything we can offshore to somebody else, we'll do that. And what I'll do with that owner is say, here's all the things that you've done, and let's go see who else can do those things through standard operating procedures and all that kind of stuff. I know that's not the topic of this conversation, so I don't want to go into the weeds,
it's super interesting. I love that. That's a great hot take. So if you're watching this, go try this because it makes sense, right? Because you don't even know. And often people that are confronted with this is because there's either something that happens in their family, right? You maybe you have appendicitis and you end up in the hospital and you can't answer your phone, or you got to be in a car accident and you just and then you realize what happened. So your hot take on just turn it off now and see what needs to change before you can do that, and see where people need you and where you need to put these systems in place. I love that. I think that is actually really, really great. So once you have that and you have those systems in place, should a owner talk about that they're thinking about selling? Should they involve the team? You said sometimes it's shock. Yeah. What have been your experience on the other side? Like, how much transparency?
Yeah. So the culture is got to be built around what do they need to know, and at the same time, what is necessary for them to feel comfortable in their role and be successful in their role. Let's consider this, right? If you sell a business to a new buyer like myself, call it almost 100% of the people are going to transition, at least for the first 90 days. It's very rare, though I've heard of it, and we've never experienced it, where someone just leaves, immediately right afterwards. I've had situations where they knew a new owner was coming in and they've left a week or two before, but I've never had a situation where we've bought and someone just immediately said, I'm out that next day, or whatever the case may be. So knowing that, I think there is some element of preparing them. A lot of the fear is, if I prepare somebody ahead of the sale that I'm leaving or this is going to take place, they most likely were looking already to transition out. And so I think that's indicative less of the thing happening and more of their current mental state around the business in general. And so that's something to just be, if you're fearful to tell people, usually it's you trying to keep the deal alive, right? And there's usually something that's going to come out. There's, not to go into the minutia of it, there's ways to recoup from a buyer's perspective if, all of a sudden there's all these skeletons in the closet. So we've got reps and warranties and all this stuff in the contracts so that we can protect ourselves of things that weren't disclosed or weren't handled appropriately. And so not to fear anybody that's in that ownership position, but to really have those conversations ahead of time with your kind of key people, I think is super important, and let them have some buy-in on it. I like to meet those key people if the owner will let me. Sometimes it's a little, uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, the goal is to own this business for decades to come. And these people are vital to what has been built. And so I want to be able to know them, and I'm sure they want to know me.
All right. That's great. I've got some barking dogs in the background, so I had muted myself. But I have a question, and then I'm going to let you talk again. So Let's talk about building company culture. Yeah. You get in there, people stay, you're talking to everybody, you're listening, you get started, you have a 2-year plan, you're very transparent. What are you doing? Who are you putting in place? Are you going in there? Are you putting yourself in? How does this work? Let's talk about what other steps you do on building company culture.
So we've been doing this for a few years now, and candidly, this is all on me. I made the mistake. The company culture of our buying company, which is Tsetserra Growth Partners, our culture was, we'd buy a business. Malcolm would come in as CEO, operator for 6 months to a year. We'll right size this business, do some different things that we need to do, implement some strategies that we have, and then I'll eject out and put somebody in. That's not scalable. Nobody else do that. We've learned a lot from that process.
I was just going to say, that's exactly what that's
totally,
counterproductive.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we were not doing it internally, what we were doing externally. We made a lot of mistakes. So we have improved that process now. We hire for what we call our generalist vice president program. So it's someone that stays internally with us for 6 to 9 months, a part of the team. And then they come be a part of that acquisition process, operating the business, and we help, and they kind of lead the front end of it, but we help through the multiple different facets of it. And very much still roll up our sleeves, get involved, all those types of things. But it just wasn't scalable for me to be answering questions about the Google Drive that we just set up, or the new phone hardware system that we needed to do, or whatever the case may be. So needed to offload that up so we can scale. So to answer your question more succinctly, we are getting better by bringing greater people within us to be a part of what we're doing that do believe in the same vision. We're building this for a long-term perspective. This business needs to transition out of being everything about the owner and needs to establish each person's role and responsibility. So we, within 2 weeks, have an org chart, and we have what we call family lunch. And so we sit down at family lunch. We have a steak, usually from Texas Roadhouse, because we're in Texas, and we get a nice meal. Everybody loves it. And we have the conversation. Here's the org chart. Have you ever seen it before? Have you ever seen anything like this? Usually it's not the case. And do you know who you report to? Do you know what your title is? We sometimes shift around titles because in small business, from my experience, titles are very easily thrown out. And so they have no weight. They have no value to them. There's no understanding of hierarchy. There's no understanding other than, it feels good. Or someone said, yeah, you're a vice president of operations and you have nobody that reports to you. And, it's a very strange culture from that perspective we have found in small business. So we established that. So that's our first 2 weeks to give you kind of a snapshot.
That's awesome. So then you 2 weeks, you put somebody in place. And I love that you self-corrected on that, because I was like, okay, so if you buy 3 businesses a year, you can't be CEO of 3 businesses. Yeah. So that makes sense that you had to do that. So you're now hiring, you're putting people in place. I love the org chart and trying to, have that conversation with people. So what is this? You said it's a 2-year process where you want to double revenue. So the first 6 months, I'm figuring out, as you're talking, there's a lot of putting systems in place and hiring people to implement systems, and you're keeping the people. What goes into a second year? How do you then? What else? I'm just trying to dig. What else can people learn from you, from your experience with this? What happens in the second year that makes that growth? And you were honest in the green room. You're like, we don't always make the goals, but sometimes we exceed the goals of doubling revenue in 2 years. And it's always great to have goals. And so funny, you mentioned marathons. I am a marathon runner. So if anybody understands that listening,
Yeah.
I understand what goes into training and how long it takes to do something. So I love that analogy for sure, 100%. But second year, let's talk about that real fast. Is there anything else with company culture or what goes into that you do specifically for the businesses that you work with? And then a follow-up question. Do you ever connect all your businesses? Because if you're the owner and you own all of them and you're not going to sell them and you promise you're not going to sell them, are they part now of a bigger company? And how do you work with that?
I'll answer those questions in reverse and keep the last one as short as sweet. We have a goal of owning 10 businesses over the next 10 years. And sometimes I've been told that's a small goal. And sometimes I'm told that's a large goal. It's all relative. That's the goal we started with, and it'll probably mold over as time goes on. But all that to be said, my goal is to sit on a Texas ranch with all these leaders that I get to develop and invest in. And we get to talk strategy and they get to do all that. But we also have built a team inside of Tsetserra Growth Partners that services and lends out to basically their time to the portfolio companies that we own. So we buy a business, we try to retain as many people as humanly possible that want to be a part of what we're doing. And then to answer your second question, in that process, when we're retaining all those people, we're implementing all these softwares, we're also in that second year trying to up level the people involved, not necessarily replacing people, but also creating new pathways of new revenue opportunities, new aspects of, HR management of all those different people, as well as just leaders with some vision. So classic example, we had a business where we needed to implement kind of the new phase of what the industry is demanding, which IoT software needed to be a part of some of the machines we were developing. And so I needed engineers to be a part of that. And there was never an internal engineer. So I'm trying to figure out how do we get people into that. That's second year kind of effort. First year is establish, get it right sized, get it all kind of everything stabilized. For the most part, people have kind of figured out their own place. And then at the same time, going into the second year, we need people that can drive and manage some of that increased capacity that we've created. And so that's a big thing for us. So one of the analogies I often use for people when they're thinking about company strategy and culture, it usually starts, it may feel like you're managing things kind of in different phases, but it usually starts on a top-down approach of a profit and loss statement. So anybody that runs a business, you got company culture starts at the sales side, and then it goes down to whoever's implementing that service or that product that you're making, which is your cost of goods sold. And then you have all the other operational people. And usually there's a conflict between those departments, those three kind of setups. And so that's my big thing is we try to handle the front end on the sales side so that there's never a paycheck missed. People understand what's coming through. We manage capacity. We know kind of what needs to happen, and there's never a dip in revenue or anything like that. We spend a lot of time there, first culture, and then we move kind of back office operation stuff. We more and more create people in those roles tends to be on that second year.
That's awesome. All right. We have just a few minutes left. Are there any, do you have a success story that you want to share, or do you have any example of something that might have gone wrong that you write it, or an unexpected, like you had that one person that said, about the vacation time or the holiday? Is there anything else that you've run into that you would share that could either open somebody's eyes, or could be like, if I'm in your position, I need to take care of that, or I need to watch out for that?
Yeah, I think you have to create a culture of constant. I know we talked about year 2 and hiring. You still need to create a culture of constant recruiting, and that you're trying to continue to bring people inside of what you're doing. That's a very strange experience for small businesses. They often are in a situation where they're just hiring for that need instead of hiring for where are we going and what are we hiring for. There's been times where we've hired where we didn't have the cash to pay that person after a period of time if it didn't work out. And we knew that if they came in, I think strategically, they would add value, tangible value to the top line of the business. And so that's where we thought we needed to take that risk. And it's paid out well every time. May not pay out well one day. So I don't recommend it to everybody's circumstances that I don't know. But I will say is you've got to be having a vision. If you're going to lead this business, you got to have a vision of where you're heading. And the culture has to be, we are heading there undetermined. We're going there no matter what. undeterred, I should say. And no matter what, we're getting there, and people become a part of that culture. And so there's been times where I've been shocked, where people have, walked into a meeting to have a conversation about how things were going, and they've said, I've realized that I'm no longer needing to be here and I'm going to move on. And I'm like, wow, I was not even going to plan to have that conversation. I just wanted to talk about how I saw you could improve so you could become a manager or whatever it may be. And so I've had that. And then I've also had the same situations where we've explored different things to kind of create more opportunity within the business. And I've flown people to Colorado, and we do business all over the world in a lot of these businesses. And so in that, we have flown people internationally, flown them to other states to interact with vendors, and have them come back and say, thank you so much. I've never been invested in. I've got guys that have never been on planes before. And so looking at ways to invest in your people is hugely valuable, and giving them that chance to see that your vision is happening tangibly through them.
That's wonderful. I actually was hoping you would say that. Invest in people, letting them, and I'm assuming that it's both, right? It's human-led, like they come to you and say, hey, I want to learn this, I want to explore this. But that probably came after you say, hey, I see that you're good at XYZ. Would you be willing to take this class or this course? Or, I think you are management material. I have this opportunity for you. So it's both ways, right? You're looking for people that take the first step, but also people who are already doing great things to up level what they're doing, correct?
Yeah. And when you're working with a business less than 50 people an employee or 100 less employee, you don't need to know every single person's personal story, but you need to know enough about them to know, like, where are they going in this organization? Are they just going to stay? Are you intending on them just being in that role for many, many years to come? Most likely you want to create a culture. If you're ambitious and you're wanting to, have something of value, you want to create a culture where people have their own internal ambition. And so I've had situations where, one of my guys wanted to leave because he had another opportunity come his way, and I'm not boots on the ground that day. And I get a phone call from him after hours and have to talk to him for an hour about my vision for him. That guy's here a year later, and he's in that vision. I mean, he's literally living it out. And so he's now managing people. And the other day we tried to give some better increases. We couldn't for one particular person or two. And he advocated for his guy. I loved it. I gave him a hug, and I was like, man, thank you so much for fighting for your guy. Like, that's what I wanted to see from a culture where you have taken ownership of this guy's livelihood and responsibilities and all that kind of stuff. And so, that's the end all be all, where someone sees it come to fruition for them of what we've promised.
I love that. All right. So we're just about at the end. I have one question. Are you Texas born? Is that why you're in Texas?
Yeah, I'm a first generation from Southern Africa area, but family came to Austin right before I was born. And I love this state. And I also think that I can wrap my arms around it in some ways too. And so born and raised in Austin, but like I said, I travel all over Texas when we operate these deals.
All right. And I love what you said, that you do your businesses do operations in different parts of the world. So if somebody's watching it and they want to reach out to you, maybe somebody is like, I want to learn more about what Malcolm and his company does, or I am doing something like that in a different state or a different country, and I'm interested in, learning more about how he did it or his story. Where can people learn about you, connect with you? Are you willing? Where are you on social media? Let's tell people how they can connect with you and work with you.
Yeah, I mean, the world's so connected these days. I had a run this morning with a guy all the way from Nevada, just happened to be in town. And so I love how connected we are. So you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, just under my name, Malcolm Peace. Should pop up on both places there. And then you can find us on online at Tsetserra.com. It's spelled Tsetserra. Love to be able to chat with anybody that's going through similar situations, but also happy to lend a hand. And there's a way where we can work together. Like I said, we love running these businesses, but I also recognize this is a universal challenge of transition legacies of businesses. And so love to be able to bat around some ideas or have anybody that I can help out or anything like that. So love to be able to chat.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and talking business strategy with us, because I think that that is really what we're all about, and people learning and learning some new ideas and new things. And company culture is a big one, whether you are a company of one or a company with, some assistance, or, you have 10 to 50 or 100 employees. All those tips that you've given us today are super, super helpful. Malcolm, thank you so much for being with us today. Those of you who stayed all the way to the end, thank you for being with us today as well. And if you're listening again to Strategy Talks, thank you for staying all the way with us to the end. Malcolm, I will see you soon. Thank you, everybody. I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks.
Thanks so much.